Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
All right, strap yourselves in because today we're going deep, really deep, into one of the most, well, it's terrifying, but also kind of fascinating ideas of the 20th century. Mutually assured destruction. MAD, as it's not so fondly known. I mean, the name itself sounds like something out of, I don't know, dystopian movie, right?
Yeah, it does have that ring to it.
But this wasn't science fiction during the Cold War. This was the very real, very scary backdrop for, like, everything.
The stakes couldn't have been higher.
Exactly. Imagine, just picture it, living every single day knowing that if one side even accidentally messed up, it could be the end of everything.
It's almost too big to really get your head around.
Which is why we have you here, our expert on, well, when it comes to Cold War strategy, you literally wrote the book. And you're amazing at taking these huge, complex ideas and making them make sense. So before we even try to unpack all the what-ifs and maybes, let's start basic. What is MAD? How did this idea, and it did start as an idea, become the strategy, the driving force of a whole era?
You're right to highlight that shift, from theory to reality. Because at its core, MAD hinges on that believability, the very real threat. To put it simply, it's the idea that if either America, the US, or the Soviet Union went ahead and actually launched a nuclear attack, well, the other side would retaliate.
Obviously.
Sure, but not just a measured response. They'd hit back so hard that both countries, everyone, would be wiped out. Total annihilation.
So it's like, what, a global game of chicken. But instead of cars, it's the planet.
That's a pretty stark way of putting it, but yeah, you're not wrong. Nobody wants to know. Right. So that fear, the ultimate fear, it becomes the thing that, in theory, stops either side from making the first move.
Okay, see, that's what I mean. That's both kind of brilliant strategically, but also absolutely terrifying. It's like holding the whole world hostage to prevent it from being taken hostage, in a way. But we're talking about this in sort of vague terms.
Yeah.
How did MAD actually play out in the real world? Like, did it actually change how leaders behaved? Did it affect the decisions they made?
100%. And that's what makes Mandy so much more than just some, academic theory. It's woven into the entire Cold War. Everything from how they talked to each other, the weapons they built, even down to, the decisions they made on a daily basis. It was always there, looming in the background. There's this great quote from the historian John Lewis Gaddis.
Oh, yeah, he's great.
He said that nuclear weapons, essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, exchange destruction for duration.
Whoa.
Meaning, before nukes, you could have wars, win or lose, but they'd be relatively quick.
Right.
Nukes change that. Suddenly, going to war, like directly between superpowers, that becomes way too risky. So instead, we get the Cold War. There's a long, drawn-out period of tension, but no apocalypse.
Destruction for duration. Man, that really sums it up. It's like we hit pause on the whole blowing each other up thing, but that pause button, it could get unpressed anytime.
Right, exactly. It's like, okay, we've avoided blowing up the planet so far, but that threat's always there, hanging over everything. Yeah, and it wasn't just theoretical. I mean, we tend to focus on the Cuban Missile Crisis, which, fair enough.
Big one, yeah.
But there were other moments, other times when things got really, really tense. Like, you can feel it when you read the historical accounts, how close we came to, to Mad Gee actually happening.
Are there any specific examples, events that really get at that? How fragile everything was?
Absolutely. The Berlin Crisis, 1961. Can't forget about that one.
Berlin, right?
Yeah.
Divided city, wall, all that.
Yep. Think about it. West Berlin, capitalist, smack dab in the middle of communist East Germany, which is basically run by the Soviets. Talk about a powder keg.
Just waiting for someone to, I don't know, light a match, practically.
And someone almost did. 1961, Khrushchev, he's the Soviet leader at the time, he makes this demand. U.S., Britain, France, out of West Berlin, now. Even threatens a separate peace treaty with East Germany, which would have given them, and the Soviets, by proxy, total control.
So it's not just about Berlin anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's symbolic, this whole clash of ideologies, global power struggle playing out on the ground.
Exactly. And here's the thing. If the West had refused to budge, you're probably looking at a direct military confrontation with the Soviets.
Which, given everything we just talked about, nuclear weapons, MAD, that could have gone very badly very quickly.
Understatement of the century. Both sides knew it too. Any fighting over Berlin, it wouldn't stay contained. Escalation, all the way up to, you guessed it, nuclear war. That was the risk they were facing.
So how do they even back down from that? Did somebody blink first?
In a way, nobody wanted to be the one to make that call, right? Neither side was ready to risk, everything over Berlin. Not then, at least. It was tense, military buildup on both sides, but Khrushchev backs down, West stays put,
But that's when they build the wall, right?
Bingo, that wall, that becomes the symbol of the Cold War, the concrete representation, the MAD. It maybe prevented the worst case scenario, but it didn't fix the problem. More like a frozen conflict than actual peace.
So a win for MAD in the sense that, no nukes flew, but not exactly something to celebrate either, just this feeling of being stuck.
Totally. And that's the thing people forget. It wasn't just about, missiles and bombs. It was this constant tension, knowing that any day, any hour, things could go very wrong, very fast. Defined a whole generation, really.
Which brings us to something else that's kind of baked into the whole MAD idea. The arms race.
Can't talk about MAD without talking about that. Oh, no.
Because if we're talking costs, and not just money, but like the mental toll, the fear, the arms race has got to be a huge part of that, right?
Absolutely. See, the core of MAD, it wasn't just about having nuclear weapons. It was about having more than the other guy. Strategic parity, they called it. Basically, if you nuke us, we can still nuke you back. Even worse.
So it's like, instead of keeping up with the Joneses, it's my apocalypse is bigger than yours.
Dark humor, but yeah, that's the gist. Constant effort to stay ahead, to look tough, to make sure nobody even thinks about pushing the button. Both sides just pouring money, resources, everything into more bombs, better missiles, scarier strategies.
Which, if you think about it, just makes everything more dangerous.
Right.
The more of those things there are, the higher the odds of something going wrong. Accident, miscalculation, who knows?
Right. And it's not even just the number. The technology itself kept getting more, sophisticated. ICBMs, those are the ones that can cross continents in minutes. Then you got SLBMs hiding underwater, ready to retaliate. Like, the whole planet's wired to blow, basically.
Okay, so we've got this terrifying arms race. Everybody's building their doomsday arsenal bigger and better. But at the same time, wasn't there an effort to, I don't know about stop MAD, but at least put some guardrails on it?
You'd think that's common sense, wouldn't you? And to be fair, even with all that standoff-ish stuff, both sides knew on some level that they couldn't just keep doing that forever.
It's like they're playing two games at once. One is build more nukes.
Oh.
The other is don't let this blow up in our faces.
Exactly, high-stakes diplomacy. And one of the ways they tried, and I'm using the word tried very specifically here, was arms control agreements.
Like treaties and stuff. Trying to limit what they could build, how much.
That was the idea. Not always successful, but hey, they tried. And the SALT talks, those started in the late 60s. That was a big deal. First time the U.S. and the Soviets really sat down and said, maybe, just maybe, we should try not to destroy everything.
SALT, Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, right. I vaguely remember that from school.
Yeah.
Did those actually work?
Well, SALT-T, that was the first round. They signed that in 72. Two big treaties came out of that. ABM treaty that limited anti-ballistic missiles.
Wait, those are the ones that are supposed to shoot down nukes, right? Why limit that?
Because here's the thing about Magellan. Both sides had to be vulnerable for it to work. If one side gets good at shooting down missiles, suddenly they can launch a first strike and figure they're safe. Recipe for disaster.
So to prevent anybody from getting too trigger happy, they had to make sure everybody stayed vulnerable.
Exactly. Sounds crazy, but that was the logic. The ABM treaty, it basically made that idea international law.
Man, my brain hurts. I'm starting to see why they call this strategic studies.
It's a lot, yeah. But the basic idea is you try to make it so the cost of starting a war is always, always higher than any possible benefit.
So SALT-I, maybe not perfect, but at least a step away from the edge of the cliff.
Yeah, exactly. They realized they couldn't just keep doing what they were doing or it would end badly for everyone.
Which brings us to, well, the end of the Cold War itself. Because if SALT was about containing the nukes, the whole Soviet Union collapsing, that's a whole new ballgame, isn't it? It's like, all right, crisis averted, the Cold War is over, everybody can relax, right? Except, not really. Because those weapons, that knowledge, it didn't just disappear.
Nope, not at all. You hit the nail on the head there. Ending the Cold War, that was huge, obviously a good thing. But it didn't magically solve the whole we could destroy all human life problem.
So even though the Berlin Wall comes down, that whole chapter's closed, the threat itself is still out there.
Oh, yeah. And it's more than just the physical bombs and missiles themselves, right? It's the infrastructure, the materials, the scientists who know how to make this stuff work, all of that. It's still around, just scattered, especially with the whole Soviet Union breaking up.
Which probably creates a whole other set of problems, right? Like, before it was two sides facing off. Now it's messier.
Way messier. Immediately, everyone's worried about those Soviet nukes. Where are they? Who's guarding them? What's to stop somebody from, well, taking them?
It's like something out of a movie. You'd think with the Cold War over, things would get simpler, but it sounds like it almost got more complicated.
That's the thing about big changes. There's always fallout. And yeah, there were incidents. Thankfully, nothing went nuclear, but enough to keep everyone on edge. This wasn't theoretical anymore. It was, oh crap, this is real.
So the Cold War ends, good news.
Yeah.
But then it's like scrambled to write a whole new rule book for a world where that threat still exists, but the old rules don't quite fit anymore.
Exactly. And on top of that, you've got proliferation. Before, it was basically just the US and the USSR with the nukes. Now, every country with enough know-how, they're thinking, hey, maybe we need those too.
Which is how you end up with, well, North Korea. They're like the poster child for this whole post-Cold War nuclear dilemma.
Pretty much. International pressure, sanctions, it doesn't matter. They've got the bomb. They're not afraid to show it off. And because they're so isolated and, let's be honest, kind of unpredictable. Yeah, it's a whole different kind of challenge.
It's like those old Barry rules,
Yeah.
terrifying as they were. They don't even really apply the same way anymore. Too many variables, too much uncertainty.
Exactly. The old logic that everyone's too scared to actually use the nukes because of what'll happen. It gets murky fast when you've got more players at the table, each with their own agenda.
Well, if MAD isn't the answer, then what is? Because we've spent this whole time talking about how scary it was, but now I feel like, what happens next? What do we do?
And that, my friend, is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
The one everybody's trying to figure out. And if this conversation gets people thinking about that, about how we deal with this threat in the 21st century, then we've done something right. There's no easy answers, but it's a conversation we have to have.
Like, usually we say never forget about the bad stuff, right? But with this, it's more like never stop thinking about it.
100%. We can't just pretend it's not there. The Cold War might be over, but those weapons, that danger, it's part of the world we live in now. That's something future generations are going to have to deal with, too.
Definitely not a cheerful note to end on, but an important one.
Yeah.
Thanks to you, not just for, all the knowledge, but for helping us actually wrap our heads around this stuff. It's complex, it's scary, but it's real. And to everyone listening, thanks for sticking with us on this deep dive. If you take one thing away from this, let it be that the choices we make, how we deal with this threat, it matters. So stay curious, keep asking questions, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.